The following video is being made in relation to a class that I am in called Language Diversity and Literacy. It is a class that throughout the entire time in, I have disagreed with basically everything stated in that course. I am making this video because this week we cannot respond in an essay format, and I do not agree with that. This is a course in an English education master's degree program. Students learning English ELA, all the way up from learning to read, all the way up to English analysis, need to be responding in an essay before they can respond in anything else. Failure to do so means that those students will not be meeting those standards. Now, this may be just my opinion, but the written word is the most important thing that a student can take. No one can take away your voice when you can write. People can take away your voice when all you can do is speak. No one can take away the voice of someone who can write. I will now go and discuss some of the things that have been brought up in this week's readings. I will also place them somewhere on the screen so that you can read what I am looking at as well. This here talks about academic language, which is something that we're all taught. Every single one of us is taught about academic language throughout our schooling. We are taught to never start a sentence with because in the beginning, but eventually we learn that you can start a sentence with because we've mastered the fundamentals and now we are able to break rules when there is a good enough reason to do so. Now, I have a deficiency in French. Why do I have a deficiency in French? Because I haven't learned French. I have a deficiency in Chinese and Japanese because I haven't learned those languages either. People who come to the United States of America without knowing English have a deficiency in English, and we need to ensure that they are able to be successful. You cannot be successful, or it's very hard for you to be successful in the United States of America if you can't speak English. English may not be the official language of the United States, but it is, well, essentially it's the lingua franca of the world. So it's very surprising to me when people don't know English because when people from other countries come here, they generally know English. This school that this assignment is for is literally a school where if you want to come into the school, you have to pass an English proficiency exam or be placed into something where you're in a English as a second language learning. And this is for both undergrads and grad students. Grad students are required to have submitted their English as a foreign language submissions. Now, looking at this, he says, perhaps more troubling to me was the fact that the frameworks available to me as an educational linguist served to reinforce these narratives in uncomfortable ways. One of our major recommendations to the district was to implement dual language programs that would allow Mexican origin students the opportunity to develop academic language in Spanish that they would then transfer to English. I am of the belief that that's not possible. I am of the belief that you need to learn academic language in each language that you learn. However, I'm also of the belief that this is putting away the needs of the many for the needs of the few or the one, which is not logical. We can't have those students be in English as a second language courses. We can teach those courses in Spanish. We can teach those courses in French, in Mandarin, whatever language we need to. But once you get into a regular education classroom, there is no reason for the classroom to be anything other than English unless it is a foreign language classroom. Would you suggest to the Spanish teacher to teach their lesson entirely in English? No, because that wouldn't make any sense. That wouldn't make any sense at all. And because it wouldn't make any sense at all, we would have major problems here. Academic language is very important, and you may notice that I'm not necessarily using academic language here. In some cases I may be, in some cases I may not be, and the reason for that is because this is a video. In a video, I generally consider it to be a much more informal setting, and I do not believe that students should be doing informal things like this for a grade. I believe that this is something that harms the education of the student, especially considering that we are using technology here, and it is my belief that no one under the age of 18 should have access to a computer, especially in the classroom, because it leads to a lot of problems. I am of the belief that these students can be successful. I am also of the belief that these students can and should learn English. And they need to learn English. Because if they don't learn English, what's going to happen is they will not be successful. And when they're not successful, what's going to happen? People are going to blame it on them and not the fact that the system failed them. And the system fails students by not requiring them to learn English. An English language arts class can only be taught in English. That's literally, there's no other way to teach it. And if the students don't know English by the time they get to high school, that's a major red flag. Now, I am of the argument that we should have a standardized language like they do in France. There should be a American language, um, the American language, well, I think we'd call them a czar. And I am of the belief that the FMCSA should be in charge of it because they're the ones who have the most in terms of what people can and can't work when they have English. A lot of people will go and drive trucks at some point in their life. Everybody, basically everybody, drives a car. You need to be able to read and understand English well enough to communicate with police officers and in order to understand the road signs. Failure to do so can result in you doing something dangerous or deadly. And unfortunately, by saying that we should have students not just go ahead and learn English, we are setting those students up for failure. And it is very upsetting to me that that's something that we are doing. I actually sent an email to the author of that article asking, do you really believe this? Because it pains me to believe that an academic would believe that. But unfortunately, what I've seen throughout my time in graduate level courses of education is that unfortunately a lot of academics in education seem to not be the type of people who want to enhance learning. Um, this article talks about adjective order, which we just fundamentally know as native English speakers. It's different in every language. We need to be able to teach that to foreign language speakers. Yes, I do agree with that. And foreign language speakers who want to teach us their language need to be able to apply that. It goes both ways. And it's important that that happens because as that happens, we have things that allow us to ensure that we know what we're talking about. And unfortunately, language does need to be agreed upon. It needs to be an agreed upon set of symbols or sounds that have meaning, meaning that we have to all agree on that. Now, unfortunately, there are times where that doesn't work. We have slang, we have new words and all of that, and dialects and all of those things. We have that 6-7 thing. We have 69 used to be the number, which I'm glad that's not the number anymore. But with all of that, it's important to understand we need to make sure that we are able to teach foreign language learners these things. And this, I do agree that native speakers are going to have an easier time learning the language than non-native speakers. Because I have a hard time learning Spanish and French and things like that. Germanic languages, I don't have a hard time with. Interestingly, both of those are Indo-European, but one is Germanic and one is Romance. Germanic languages, of course, going from Old German, and then that became what we know as Old English, but really that's just a dialect of German. Then moving into Middle German, Middle English, which was a little bit different because it combined with French. Then moving into early modern and then modern English and German. And all of that is something for us to think about when we do things. And all of that is something that we have to think about. So, yes, it is important for us to know that foreign language speakers are going to have a harder time learning English because of the weird rules we have. And we need to make sure that there are things that we can do to support them. And the best way to support them is not integrating them into the regular education classroom. That is a great way to not only not support them, but not support the native speakers as well. What needs to happen is there needs to be an English as a second language, and then a regular classroom, and then integrate slowly into the mainstream classroom as their English skills become better. Now, this here is interesting because I can be considered mass media, and I am not trustworthy for most of the things I post. Do you really think Patrick Mahomes owns a Waffle House in my bedroom? Did Grover Cleveland crap my pants 132 times in 2024? I garnered 200 million views over the last 5 years. That is, by definition, mass media. That is more viewers than the Super Bowl. That is more viewers than the Indianapolis 500. There's more viewers than the Daytona 500. That is 4 times the viewership worldwide of Game 7 of the 2025 World Series. I'm mass media. Mass media is not always trustworthy. It cannot, by definition, always be trustworthy. We always have to talk about the language that people use. Many people don't. realize that what I'm doing is satirical for the most part, but I do have videos that aren't satirical. For example, my sports predictions videos, not satirical. My videos going over analytics, not satirical. This video, not satirical. My anime stuff, not satirical. My literary analysis, usually not satirical. Sometimes it is. But that is something that we need to talk about is mass media is not always trustworthy, and I do wonder about why so many people think it is. I do fully and wholly agree that the media can be used to manufacture consent. The media was used to manufacture consent for a Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton run. Media was used to manufacture consent for Hillary Clinton to win the Democratic primaries in 2016, despite the fact that she was the least electable candidate of all time. Um, and then Harris lost to, and then also they can manufacture consent for Harris to take over for Biden. And then she became just the second person ever to lose to Donald Trump. And she wants to run for president again, and I don't think she should do that. But it's not just the news. And yes, it talks about entertainment. Now, I want to talk about the TV show NCIS, because NCIS, way back in its early days, premiered in 2004, talked about terrorism. And pretty much every terrorist back then was a Muslim. Why? Because they were manufacturing consent for Islamophobia. Why? Because after 9/11, Islamophobia had made it so that they could manufacture consent to invade Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places. And that is why we are in the quagmires we're in right now. But I would argue that this is why it's such a vital importance to teach everyone in the United States of America English from a young age. From the time you are born, from the time you set foot on American soil, you should be taught English and you should be made to understand how important it is to know English in the United States of America. Because if you don't know English, you are at a huge disadvantage. And that disadvantage is unfortunately one that is going to hurt you. And as it hurts you, you are going to end up having either economic pain, physical pain. You may end up in prison due to not understanding the way the law is, all of those things. And unfortunately, there is nothing we can do about that other than make sure that you learn English. And sadly, by saying that we shouldn't have um, English as a second language courses, we are harming students. And by harming students, we are doing horrible, horrible things.